So to celebrate Shrek's 20-year anniversary this year, that's right, the first Shrek movie is 20 years old. I thought it would be fun to go through my favorite DreamWorks franchise besides How to Train Your Dragon, which I'll be doing that after the Shrek movies. Yeah, I thought I'd go over the Shrek movies, and we're gonna start with Shrek Run, and then we're gonna go all the way to Shrek the musical. It's Shrek, it's Shrek 2, Shrek 3, Shrek 4, and Puss in Boots and Shrek musical. Shrek 2 is my favorite Shrek movie. We'll get to that one when we get to that one. But let's talk about Shrek. Shrek has a really funny story behind it. Basically, we have Katzenberg, who created DreamWorks. He used to work at Disney, hated Disney because they didn't make him president of the freaking company. He helped usher in the Disney Renaissance, creating films like Beauty and the Beast and all that stuff, bringing Disney back to its glory days that now were a big deal. And, helped usher in this great era and great financial profit for Disney. So it's no wonder he thought he would be the president of Disney for what he was doing, but no one seemed to like him. He had too much of an ego and things like that. So they kicked him and said bye-bye. So Shrek was kind of... So the first two films DreamWorks ever made were kind of responsive to that. Ants was a ripoff off of A Bug's Life. This is very famously known because he was very, pissed off, and so that was the thing. I don't know how they never got sued over it. It's like, I guess the fact is they really couldn't prove it, but it's pretty obvious. Then you also had Prince of Egypt, which was a film that he pitched to Disney, but Disney said they would make no such religious films in general, and so that is a major thing to think about, and then we have Shrek. And Shrek is the most responsive. First of all, we have the villain. His name is Lord Farquaad. Now, that sounds like the F word. And he looks like the president of Disney at the time. If you look up the president who was the president of Disney in 2001, he looks exactly like him. This film makes fun of the Disney Renaissance and all those films in a very funny way. This film is kind of built on hatred for Disney, but it works. It's a really funny movie. I think one of the things that helps this movie a lot is, sure, the animation is kind of dated, and some say the music is kind of dated. Like, I don't agree with that. Here's the thing. So this is a movie where the universe is kind of more cynical, and so the pop music, I think, kind of helps with that and gives this movie this interesting atmosphere. It's a great soundtrack, not just because it fits the tone in the movie very well, but also the comedy's really great, and a lot of that has to do with the voice acting. Like, every time I hear about, hey, they're rebooting Shrek, I'm like, okay, but you're not going to replace Cameron Diaz. You're not going to replace Mike Myers. And you're not going to replace Eddie Murphy. You're not going to replace those people because they're so talented at playing these characters. They brought them to life. I still would like to see the version of this movie where Chris Farley was going to play Shrek. He died tragically before this movie. I was actually able to finish, sadly. But, I'd like to see that version of this movie. But I'm sure it exists in some parallel universe or something, but we're never going to see that Shrek movie. It's a great movie for a lot of those reasons. I also think this movie is kind of underappreciated because of what the Shrek franchise became. This movie is a great movie. The animation was very good for its time. It's a bit dated now, but it was the standard for the time. Like, this was impressive. It's kind of like when you look at Toy Story. Like, are you gonna say Toy Story animation was bad, or bad by today's standards. You know, but Shrek was very impressive. It won the Oscar. It was the first ever Best Animated Feature winner Oscar. It's such a great movie. I think one thing that's very underappreciated about this movie is the score. The score by James Powell. Excuse me if I pronounced that wrong. He also did the score for How to Train Your Dragon, and I think for this movie it's really great score, and I think that's a very underappreciated aspect of this movie. Out of the good Shrek movies, which is really just Shrek 2, Shrek 4, and Shrek, I think this is the weakest. Because it's just not as it's not as emotional and as funny and all that as the other two of as Shrek Forever After and Shrek 2, but I think it's still a solid movie in its own right. I think they just improved a lot of stuff as they went along, especially in Shrek 2. I think it's such a great movie. I think I think everyone's kind of going through this phase now where they see Shrek as kind of a dated movie, and I went through that phase too. But honestly, looking back at it and actually sitting down and examining this film for this review, I think Shrek is actually still holds up. I think people underestimate how impactful this movie is in terms of what it did to the animation industry. If you ever wonder why animated movies always seem a need to put in like these adult humor jokes or and stuff like that, that's because Shrek was very popular because of the fact that it had this in this movie. It works in this movie. It doesn't work in a lot of other animated movies, especially the ones where you can tell the entire movie was written just for children, but and only children in mind, and it was made to be enjoyable by the smallest of children, like really little kids. And then there's like a couple dirty jokes that feel really out of place. That's a lot of what happens now because of Shrek. Also, this is also Aladdin's fault too, but it's also the reason why we have so many celebrity castings. But again, for those movies, it really worked because Robin Williams' iconic roles, the genie, Mike Myers, Eddie Murphy, and Cameron Diaz as all their characters in these movies, phenomenal. It works, but that's the thing about things that get really successful. It inspires a lot of imitators who don't really care about what made it work. They just think they can capitalize off of the fact that, hey, this thing was successful, so it'll be successful if we do it. But they don't understand what made that thing successful or good in the first place. And that's kind of just what happens. That's kind of how things work with that sort of thing. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth of the matter. And I think we see that a lot with that aspect. But this is a great movie. It still holds up 20 years later, and yeah, I mean, just Shrek is great. Despite all the memes, despite all the jokes, Shrek is still a good movie.